Good job.
And you're somewhere out there. I can't really see you in the usual way, but I'll trust you're there. Fiona Hayes, hello.
I'm always here, Joe. How are you?
Lurking with intent.
That's it. Very one.
So lots to get through. We'll come to the weekend's action in just a moment. But Andy Farrell has named his 37-man squad for the November internationals. South Africa, Fiji, Australia, namely. And we have Kieran Frawley in of the uncapped players. Jeremy Lockman in. Joe McCarthy is in. Jimmy O'Brien, who's been filling in for Hugo Keenan at fullback at Leinster, is in. Keen Prendergast in as well. They were, to be fair, all on the New Zealand tour. Calvin Nash, who was at the Emerging Ireland Tour in South Africa, wasn't in New Zealand. He gets the nod as well. So they're the 6 uncapped players in the 37-man squad. And then, Rory, we have plenty of omissions as well. I suppose that's more the headline news, the mainstays who don't quite make the cut.
Yeah, and they're not selection calls really, it's injuries. James Lowe won't make it, Ian Henderson won't make it, Andrew Conway and Keith Earls are not going to make it either. And I think the cloud hanging over this Ireland squad is that there's about 9 players in there, or 8 or 9 players who would have been in the 23 against New Zealand, who are named in the squad but are currently rated as doubts because they're currently not available for the provinces. Now some of them haven't played at all this season, including Hugo Keenan and Jamison Gibson Park, who are some of the first names on the team sheet. Some of them picked up injuries last weekend, like James Ryan, Tyke Byrne, Josh van der Fleer, to name but 3. So it's the squad is named. I mean, I presume they would have named more second rows if they were really concerned about Ryan and Byrne in particular. Kieran Treadwell, I think, is due to come back this weekend for Ulster. Ryan Baird is currently out with a concussion as well. So there's a lot of players who are in the squad, but we're just not quite sure where they are at fitness-wise going into this window. And the key areas of concern really are the back 3, which, as I said, Lowe, Conway, Earls would have all been in contention to start. Jordan Armour's also out. And the second row, where there's just doubts over a couple of those players. And Ian Henderson, is one of Ireland's first choice players when he's fit, but he just hasn't been fit for a good while. But there's still a lot of content. You focus on the lads who aren't there. When you look at the squad, there's still huge quality. It's still very competitive and a very settled squad as well. You mentioned 5 of the uncapped players have already been in the squad, and the other one was on the Emerging Ireland Tour, so they're not new to it. It's not like there's someone being plucked out of oblivion. Calvin Nash is probably the big surprise, but there's a big number of absentees in the back 3. He gets his go, and he played very well on Saturday.
Yeah, there may well be an issue with match practice and match sharpness, of course, but the word on Hugo Keenan is positive, that he will be fit to play against South Africa. And then we have Jacob Stockdale, surprise inclusion given his ankle injury. Mac Hansen is getting lots of game time. So at a glance, the back 3 crisis, for want of a better word, Fiona, looks like a crisis, but maybe come game time against South Africa, it's not going to be so bad.
Yeah, I think so. And look, you talked about quality there as well. I know Stockdale hasn't had loads of game time, but it's great to see him back in the mix. And he's a guy that's going to be chomping at the bit. And to get on that pitch for Ireland, a lot of talk about Lowe, and he'd feel that pressure having gotten that injury, and he'll know that he has to crawl his way back. But I think there's enough quality there. I know physicality is going to be a huge thing against the South Africans, but you've Balakoon as well as another guy coming into form. So whether Keenan's back, it's the full back position I'll be looking at. Will they have a look at Lowry? Are they going to go with Jimmy O'Brien? That's definitely a position. If Keenan, he's been so solid in the last few games for Ireland, I suppose, and injury free, it isn't a position that we've had to look at because he's a guaranteed starter most games. So I would be kind of questioning who'll slot in there seamlessly. We know Stockdale maybe could do a job in there as well. So it's going to be interesting, but I think it's great. I think it's the perfect kind of time for these injuries. It might be a chance for some guys that we haven't seen enough of to know, are they ready to make that big step when it comes to World Cup time, and it seems like the perfect window now, Joe.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you sort of suspect if Hugo Keenan is even 85-90% fit, he has so much credit in the bank that they might go for him.
It depends on how you look at it from Andy Farrell's point of view. I mean, this South Africa game, Ireland played them in the pool at next year's World Cup. They haven't played South Africa since 2017. It's the one, they beat New Zealand 3 times in the last 18 months or so, but you always looked at it going, this team is kind of built to beat New Zealand, and you wonder about the power sides. Like, they haven't beaten France in this cycle. They had struggles against England when England were stronger at the start of the cycle, and they haven't played South Africa, and that's a big concern. That when they come up against power of that South African pack married with their bench, that bomb squad coming on, they might struggle, and we want to see that. That's what we want to see, the full Irish side play against this team. But at the same time, a year out from the World Cup, what better time for Mike Lowry to start a game at 15 and cope with what South Africa have to offer and find out whether he is the man, or Stockdale, because Stockdale has played fullback for Ireland in this cycle. He is big, strong, and has a cannon of a left boot. He may be more suited to coming in to replace James Lowe, but he has all the attributes you want against the South African team as well. So there should be some room for experimentation. These games, I mean, Ireland are number one side in the world. They may lose their ranking, but really that's of no major consequence. And I think they'll be competitive. They're not going to. I don't see this being a kind of a confidence damaging defeat unless they get pinned into the corners and battered and their scrum collapses and all that sort of stuff. But should be room. You shouldn't be pressing Hugo Keenan into action with 0 minutes for what is ostensibly a friendly or challenge match. It's one that Ireland want to win and want to perform in. But there's no guarantee Hugo Keenan will be there in the year when they play South Africa. So Lowry is fit, he's playing well. Or Stockdale, who did play really well in the first couple of games for Ulster before picking up a fresh ankle injury. Or Jimmy O'Brien, who's playing really well for Leinster in Keenan's stead and is very good in the air as well. This is a time to find out about these players as well.
I must say, until I was just listening to a conversation earlier as well, Fiona, I'd forgotten Ireland are number one in the world. I guess because of 4 years ago, you don't put too much stock in it and it's no guarantee of anything. But you kind of forget Ireland are number one in the world, France number 2, South Africa number 3. And as Rory says, even weird that Ireland have not played South Africa since 2017. So I don't know. You throw all those ingredients in. Does that increase how important this is or make no difference whatsoever? Who knows? But I could see Andy Farrell thinking, well, if there's one game psychologically, it would be good to win in advance of the World Cup, akin to winning away in New Zealand. You sort of look at South Africa and that's the one where you can go to a World Cup then with total confidence you can handle whatever's thrown at you.
Yeah, that's it. And I think he's going to try out his strongest squad possible for that first game. Maybe Fiji and Australia, he might mix up a few things and you might get to see a lot of the guys coming through in that game. But I feel like that South African game will be huge. Exactly like you said, Joe, it's the confidence going into it. I don't think people like to discuss being number one in this country anywhere near a World Cup. We don't even want to mention it. So I had forgotten as well till you said it there. Look, it's huge. 2017, the last time we've seen them, South Africa have won a World Cup in people's eyes. When you win a World Cup, I suppose they're the best in the world if you view it that way. So it's a chance on home soil to go out and really put it up to that South African pack. And I suppose he'll take a look at how the top or the Pro 14 teams are doing as well in this URC, how they've been playing, because we've seen that power game, and especially towards the end of last season in the big games against Leinster, we talked about how that South African power was coming through. So you wouldn't want to see Ireland be dominated either at set piece or around the breakdown or around that gain line carry area either. So I'm sure they will be focusing on that, and I think we will see that that South African will be the strongest Irish team you could possibly put out. Obviously injuries and all that taken into contention.
So if James Ryan's is fit, who's with him? With Henderson out?
Tadhg Byrne.
Even against South Africa?
Well, again, it's not going to affect, because I would like to see Tadhg Byrne play at 6 against South Africa, because I think he fits there well. But do you start Kieran Treadwell there? I think this is where Henderson would have been really valuable and won't be there. They really rate Joe McCarthy, and he has the physical profile to match the Boks, I think. But they're still not quite ready they're still not quite sure if he's knocked the edges off his game, and I think he's more likely to play against the New Zealand A side on the Friday night. So I think what you'll see is Ryan and Byrne starting the second row with that back row of probably Doris, either Van der Fleer or O'Mahony, depending on whether Van der Fleer is fit, and Jack Conan at 8. Although Ryan Baird was playing really well at 6 for Leinster and looked like I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, a rare opportunity to interview an current Ireland international one-on-one in person, and he is incredibly driven this season to kind of become a kind of Courtney Laws figure, and it looked like it was kind of manifesting itself into his game until he got a horrible head injury against the Sharks. But he's been named in the squad. He may play again before the window. He's another option to come in on that six slot. So they have options. I think they would like to have someone of that athletic profile at 6, and maybe what you do is and they've listed Ryan Baird as a back row, so there's maybe scope to do that, but it's hard to argue against the players who started against New Zealand and backing them. I know we want to match up against South Africa. At the same time, what Ireland's strength have gotten them so far, their attacking game plan, Burns handling, the fact that he was the one who basically won them the game in the third test in New Zealand.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue against, starting that pack again, which they're all fit and available. It's a pity Ronan Kelleher isn't back as well. That's a real shame, because I think he's built to play against South Africa.
And with that, sorry, Joe, is with that as well. We're talking about Tadhg Beirne, I suppose, there when he's in the second row. I think he gets far more turnovers when he's at sick, because obviously he's out on the defensive scrum and he's getting in and he's monitoring that over the ball. So even at that turnover time, he's come up with huge ones when he's playing in back row. And I think you'll have to take that into account going into those big games as well.
Yeah, great point.
And he's struggling. He's got a calf problem after the weekend. So he's another one there's a doubt over.
Why are there so many injuries?
I think there's just tough games. I think that there's been a series of big games early in the season. It's probably the extra competitiveness of the URC manifesting itself, and a bit of luck and a bit of bad timing.
Yeah, a few pre-season ones thrown in.
I think some of those lads were sent for surgeries on injuries that they wanted to clear up before the World Cup. So this was, I think Hugo Keane and James Lowe, they were all scheduled for after New Zealand, and it was kind of a risk that they might miss these games. But really, in the bigger picture, having them guys right for next year. Gibson Park's an unlucky one. He was ill and he picked up an injury. He was supposed to play and he hasn't played yet.
Okay.
And the rest of them are just kind of wear and tear over the course of a couple of tough games. And we're going to have more. It's Leinster Munster on Saturday night. There's going to be people coming out of there on in a bad way as well. So it's just the nature of the beast.
Sure. And the last one, are South Africa coming very much locked and loaded, fully strengthened, ready to go?
Yeah, they're hosting a camp with all of their kind of South African-based players at the moment. Rassie Rasmus was speaking yesterday. He seems to be centrally involved again. He's going to be overseeing their A side who are playing in Thoma or in Páirc Uí Chaoimh the second week. They're bringing a big squad, and they just have such depth. There's players starring in the URC who can't get near their squad, who they won't be Springboks for another 2 years because they have such an array of incredible talent. So yeah, you'll see all of their big names, and we haven't seen a lot of them in the URC yet because the Boks basically all played in the Rugby Championship and they've been given a bit of time off. The Sharks will have a lot of them against Ulster this weekend, but a lot of them have been put on ice and they'll come back into it for this tour. So this that 2017 game was a mismatch. It was when Alistair Coetzee was still in charge. They weren't the force that they are now. We haven't played against the proper Springboks for a long time. We saw a bit of it with the Lions, and they caused Tadhg Furlong struggled at times in those tests as well. So this is an incredible road test. I think this is the ultimate. It's a pivotal moment in the World Cup cycle because it's the one team that I think these could be Ireland's kryptonite. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well that's very much on the horizon. In the immediate term, we have Leinster Munster Saturday 5:15 at the Aviva. Ulster staying on in South Africa. They play the Sharks. That's also 5:15 on Saturday, and Connacht on Friday night will host the Scarlets. So Leinster Munster 5:15. This rivalry, Fiona, we've had 11 matches in 4 years because of COVID. There were more games maybe than usual. 11 matches in 4 years. We have had 2 Munster wins across those 11 matches. Munster 1 win in their last 9 against Leinster, or 3 in 15. Basically, whichever way you want to cut it up, it's not good. So I don't know. How alive is this rivalry really at the moment, Fiona?
Yeah, I suppose that's a good point, Joe. I've been at those classes and at those couple of victories as well. And I think with this Munster squad, we've been giving them, I suppose, a bit of stick over the last few weeks, but they came out with a very good performance last weekend. They won't say excellent, but a very good performance. And they're obviously they're going to have to build on that. The Aviva is definitely not a nice place for them to go when playing against Leinster. It doesn't seem to suit them at all. But look, I still firmly believe that these inter-pro matches, no matter who they're playing, are just absolutely, great battles. And the players want to go out. When you played with Munster, or if you're playing Leinster, is the team you want to beat, and they're definitely the last few years, the pinnacle team in all groups. Even in Europe, you're looking at them and they've been really exciting to watch. So I think we will see a much better performance by Munster again, and a right hardy battle. I know I watched Connacht last week against Leinster, and obviously I thought they dominated in some areas of the game. There probably will be a lot of changes into the Leinster team, but I think it will still be the battle that we'll all be expecting.
Yeah, so certainly very live for Munster. Like, it's almost the touchstone against which they judge themselves, Rory. But for Leinster, I mean, it's hard to imagine that this.
I actually
is
see
like
it the other way,
big
Joe.
thing, do you?
If you look at those results,
Yeah.
it brings out the best in Leinster every time. You think about that Pro 12 or Pro 14 final. I keep just start calling it DRC consistently, even whatever year it was, because they're confused. The one in lockdown when Munster showed up at the RDS and Leinster physically wiped them out. The only Munster player who really showed up that day was Gavin Coombs. Leinster retain, I think possibly because Johnny Sexton and Leo Cullen draw the memory of what they went through in the 2000s and still apply it in Munster week. This rivalry still means something to them in a way that they've channeled into a really positive thing, because when they show up against Munster, even when they were missing all of their players in the Aviva Stadium last year, they produce, and it still means a lot to their fans. 40,000 people going to the game on Saturday, and I would say the vast majority will be Leinster fans, because Munster fans in the last couple of years have travelled in less numbers to Dublin, probably on the back of a number of things, cost being one of them, but also the fact that they keep losing there. It's not a happy hunting ground for them, and they've kind of lost a bit of hope around this fixture. And Leinster tend to deliver very good performances when they play Munster, and they really hate losing to them. And I think now they're becoming almost like, it's not quite the All Blacks against Ireland and that kind of fear of being the team that loses to Munster, but you've got a record there that you want to protect. They'll bring back Sexton this week. They'll have the majority of the Ireland starting team in their team, apart from the lads who are injured, and they will deliver performances that they think will get them into the Ireland team in 2 weeks' time against South Africa.
So
that's what drives them.
Payback for the 2000s is what you're saying.
No, it's also a standards thing, and I think it's the fact that the rivalry exists for them. And what I think is they've done is they've gotten so on top of Munster and into a generation of Munster players' heads that often Munster come up the road beaten before they get here. And what Roundtree, Prendergast, Leamy and Kiriakou have to do is make those players who have been beaten down by this rivalry believe again, and also infuse the young players with something fresh. And you see it with Coombs. I'd say if you put Shane Daly, if you put Jack Crowley out there on Saturday, they don't have that baggage, and that's where the belief might come from. It looked like on Saturday that those players believe that they can beat anyone. They looked really confident. Well, it's the players who've been around.
Yes,
and have
I get all that. I wasn't suggesting that the rivalry is dead for the players. Of course it's not, and every game's important. But for instance, if you're the more casual voter, there was a time when this rivalry was very alive and it was essential viewing. Whereas now I would put it to you, Chelsea play Manchester United Saturday 5:30.
Yeah.
So there will be a quotient who will say, well, do I really need to tune in to see Leinster beat Munster again by 10 to 15 points pretty comfortably at the Aviva Stadium? And unfortunately, Fiona, I mean, that might insult a whole bunch of Munster fans or Munster players, but I think that would be a fairly widely held viewpoint ahead of this game, which is a pity for what was almost once upon a time absolutely essential viewing, regardless of whether you're a rugby fan or not.
Yeah, and you're looking, and you know what? I suppose you're looking at that Ulster Sharks game as well, Joe, and that's kicking off at the same time. And I didn't know kick-off times till the other day, and that's a game I've been chomping at the bit to have a look at, because I know that they'll be fully loaded. The Sharks, they'll be bringing their guys back. So, like, I'm a huge Munster fan. Hopefully they can stick in the game, and I think those neutral fans might not be back in this Munster team. But I think obviously you're talking about the soccer there. That's fine. Down this way, you have your two separate fans, the rugby fans. Sure. There's a lot of arguments that go on in the pub over Man United, Liverpool, etc. But and the rugby. But look, I think it's for the guys out there. They need to win this, and I think Rory had it spot on there. I think there's a lack of belief. There's a lack of belief in the fans at times, but I think they could overturn this by going up and having an absolutely youth performance. I've looked at the headlines in the last few days, and it actually kind of worried me, because there's all these headlines about Munster, these so many injuries, that it might affect Munster, and these guys, they're going to wait till last minute to check on the likes of Casey and Byrne. But back in the day, I suppose it didn't matter who was injured. Guys were going out there, they wanted to play and they wanted to perform in these big derbies, and I hope it's the exact same thing. I hope it's not a case of, if both these guys can't play, that Munster are already in their heads, they think they're going to lose. But I do believe the squad look a little bit more confident after last week, and guys stepped up to the plate. So there are guys there to put their hand up. Obviously Casey was huge, and the speed he gives is so exciting to watch. So I'm hoping he'll definitely be there and he can speed up that game.
I guess, Rory, it's not essential that Munster win. It's just that it's a performance and it's a contest. Otherwise, it's a real morale killer.
Yeah, and they could do a picking up a point or two, even if they do lose, because as we've discussed in here a couple of times now, that they're in a bit of a race for Europe, and the 5 points they got against the Bulls last weekend was pretty key. But I mean, this is supposed to be a derby match where, you know, the cliche goes, form goes out the window, and in reality, it's two teams going out there for 80 minutes. Like, why should Munster come up the road thinking they're beaten before they get there? I know Leinster
two wins in 11 is why.
Sure, but this is a new team, a new coaching ticket. Look, I mean, the bookies will tell us. I think that I won't quote them but the odds on Munster winning are quite long from what I checked earlier in the day. I've forgotten what they were.
What's a good, and this is like awful question Fiona's be asking. What's a good margin of defeat for Munster here with a good performance? Losing bonus point, is that kind of
losing bonus points? I think any team in the URC, if they're playing Leinster away, picking up one losing bonus point or scoring four tries is not a bad return when you look at your kind of gaming it out over the course of the season. But really, you got to be going up the road looking to win this game and thinking that Leinster are not indestructible, because, like, you know, the Bulls have beaten them. Munster just beat the Bulls last weekend. I know you can't draw that line particularly. La Rochelle have done it. I know La Rochelle have superstars. These lads play and train with these other, you know, so the Munster players train and play with the Leinster players in Ireland camp all the time. They know they're human.
Yeah.
They're good players themselves. So they got to come up with some level of belief. They can't think that way. But yeah, sure, when you probably budget for 1 point, but you come up hoping to get 4. You know, Leinster have shown vulnerability this season. Like, Zebre scored 4 tries against them, didn't they? And the Sharks scored 4 or 5 tries in Dublin a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. And I think it's due to be a dry track. It's hard to believe after what we've gone through in Dublin today. But, you know, like, Munster need to believe that they're going to be better.
Yeah.
And I think they need to be pushing into the last quarter of the game with a chance of winning this match.
Which would be very exciting. Fiona, I can hear you trying to get in. I'm practically trolling you here at this stage. I do appreciate this is a very negative line of questioning. I do accept that, but go on.
No, just I suppose looking at the match last week, I mean, Connacht were absolutely defensively in Leinster's face. I know you could be dealing with a completely different animal because selections will be different next week. But I thought if Connacht's handlers had been a lot better, if they'd been more efficient in that scoring zone, I think they could have come away with the victory. Obviously, Leinster went in, they'd underperformance and they got out of there with the points they needed. But I definitely saw a little weakness in there. And when Connacht attacked them and were in their face and tried to slow down their ruck ball, at times Leinster didn't know where to attack. So that's definitely a focus that Munster, and I'm sure they've tried to do that in every game that they have played. I totally understand that. But you know, the tries that have gone in against Leinster this season, we haven't seen tries like that at the start of any other season in a long time. I know Leinster are playing good rugby and scoring well, but the tries that have gone in, if you can get a couple of tries on them early, I think you'd really test that team and character.
Very fair point. Fiona, I'm curious to see how you would like Munster to approach the game. So, for instance, Gordon Darcy was on with us on Monday and has kind of written similar opinions in his piece in the Irish Times today. So he said, if Rowntree opts for Casey, his groin injury permitting, and perhaps Jack Crowley as well, starting with Joey Carbery, it signals a clear intention that Munster are coming to play. Regardless of the result, I believe that will go a long way in the dressing room. And later on in the piece, he said they need to have the courage to move away from those close-range carries in the opposition 22 to mix up the point of attack as they managed to do successfully against the Bulls. So that was like Gordon Darcy summing up what he wants from this Munster team on Saturday. What do you want from Munster?
Yeah, I something similar. I'd go with Carbery, obviously starting. I think he was outstanding. Is he talking about maybe a 10-12 Carbery Crowley, or is that just Crowley on the bench?
10-15 potentially. What would your reading that be?
No, I'd be going with Carbery after last week's performance. You know, it takes a lot of pressure off Crowley. Maybe have him on the bench coming in. I'm definitely very keen on Casey. I thought he varied the play last weekend and he worked really well. And you've two confident guys, obviously injury permitting, that they go. So I think they're doing it right. I think they're blending in these younger guys, but it's okay to have them on the bench and the likes of Paddy Campbell and giving them some time. But I'd definitely be going with that with Carbery, Casey starting if both fit to do so.
Crowley hasn't played much at centre. I haven't seen him anyway.
No, more fullback, and he played a bit of convert in the AL as well. But he's so good. I think you could play him anywhere, and he has a bit of swagger and a bit of size about him. But I think if you're going up against Robbie Henshaw, you need to probably match a bit of size there. So I would think that's a bit of a risk. And
I guess the core point is he's talking about two playmakers, and that overall approach.
But it doesn't have to be from the start. You can bring that. You can I know it was a needs must situation last Saturday, but he came in after 40 minutes and he looked so confident. And I think he did hit the way he dovetailed with Carberry was really impressive, and that was against a team full of size. So that shows that there's another way to go. You don't necessarily need to match that. But the Leinster centres are in such good form. Fekitoa really needs to step it up. Like there was signs that he was, he's getting a little bit more comfortable in there, and obviously they've ripped up the entire system and they're trying to start again, and that's a difficult thing to do. But where they might where you fear for them is the fact that Leinster are just so slick when they have the ball, and Munster are still trying to find their way, whereas Leinster just know it. It's innate. They've been doing this for years, and you look at those two centres and they're just so confident and so on top of what they're doing. They're in flow all the time, and Sexton just looks so comfortable, and that's where you fear. That's why they need to just get in and dirty the ball. They need to get in. They need to rile Sexton. Like they need to do what all the opposition teams do and get under their skin and just upset them, and that's going to be difficult, but that's the challenge.
I guess that's a very interesting point, because I would think, Fiona, they could be so focused on this new style of play and two playmakers and changing the point of attack and speeding the game up and trying to get away from those close range carries and all of the things that you suspect this group are now working towards together. And in the midst of all that, you could forget about, well, let's rile Johnny Sexton up and let's start a few rows and let's do all the things you need to do to make this a bit of a gritty contest.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that's going to happen. I mean, you've guys on there. Peter O'Mahony loves doing it. Coombs has shown a bit of a spark when it comes to those little fracas at times as well. So look, they're well capable of doing that. There's been a lot of talk about Johnny giving out to the referee. Everyone, they've been up in camp. They know what these guys know exactly what he's like. So they're 100% going to try and rile him up. And, there's players there that they will obviously try and get at. And that's just all part of the local derbies. I'd say we don't even know the half of it. I remember years ago going to that thing where Johnny Sexton roared in Rog's his face down in the ground down in Thomond Park, and it was only afterwards I heard what exactly Rog had said to Sexton as he was coming onto the pitch. So that's all part and parcel of it, and it's great, and I love that part of the game too.
To go back to the original point, Joe, actually, it's been a bit too nice. That's really where the night down in Thomond Park a couple of years ago where Sexton hunted Carby around in 2018, 2019, and he was taken off. It was like he was obviously a pre-planned substitution, but like for about 50 minutes, Thomond Park was absolutely electric, and Sexton was, the great hero of the previous 12 months was like being vilified, and I just felt that it was brilliant. But it doesn't happen often enough, and I'm not saying we want Johnny Sexton to completely lose his head on Saturday, but like a bit of spark, a bit of bite. Yeah. That's what Munster. This is what made this fixture great.
No,
in the
you're
first
dead
place.
right. And to be fair, actually, because I'm, my line of questioning there is tough on Munster. To be fair to them, an aspect of this derby that has been missing has been the crowds. And so, like, you think of the RDS final where Munster didn't land a shot with no crowd there. That's, Fiona, that felt especially kind of grim. That felt like a low point almost in the rivalry. But the crowds are a big aspect.
Definitely the crowds are a big aspect, and we don't know exactly how many is going to go up to Viva. As I said, it's not really a great place to play Leinster. I know the RDS is a tighter vicinity. You can hear the crowd a little bit more, but those massive games, the crowd get behind them, especially in Thomond Park, and even that Wycherley tackle on Johnny Sexton. I mean, I remember being in that crowd and everyone went absolutely crazy. And as a team, to get that kind of dominant hit going forward, it just adds a little bit. It'll give you an extra 5 minutes in the tank if you hear the crowd going absolutely wild.
So Fiona touched on the fact that Leinster not invincible, and we talked a couple of weeks ago, even after the game at the RDS, which was a great game, their susceptibility to set piece tries, even they weren't defending those especially well. Leinster are always difficult to judge in the URC because so much runs relatively smoothly, even when they have the kind of foot off the gas in the opening game in Italy, and even conceding all those points at the RDS a couple of weeks ago, they still tend to win. So it's always hard to know what's just operating in their comfort zone for different periods of matches versus maybe, we can look back on X, Y and Z when they lose in Europe and say, well, that shows they weren't kind of operating at full steam. So to what extent are they at full steam is the question.
I think Leo Cullen, when this window ends, will be quietly satisfied at the fact that his team have been tested, whether it's in Ravenhill, whether it's by the Sharks in the RDS. Zebre to some extent, when that was a much weaker team, that was a kind of a hodgepodge team.
And sorry to interrupt, is that, are we putting that down to other teams improving or Leinster slipping?
The level of the tournament has been better this year. Like the Sharks are a team that we just didn't have that calibre for the last 10 years of this tournament. Ulster are very close to them. Connacht brought a level of physicality that tested Leinster and tested their defence an awful lot and their goal line defence. Now, they may not have stretched them, but it was an awful night down in Galway. I think Munster will ask them questions at the weekend, certainly physically, and will go after their breakdown in a way that will prepare them for the battles to come. So when they park up at the end of this with probably 95% of the points that were available in the pocket, but also a good test along the way, they'll be pretty pleased with how this window has gone, apart from the fact that they've got a fairly lengthy injury list. They've got a more difficult European draw this year because they didn't win the league last year. Again, I think that will prepare them better for the battles to come. So I think Cullen, he has complained in the past, rightfully, that he doesn't learn much from beating Treviso by 50 points. I think he wants Munster to test them. I think he wants these games. He wants them to win at the end of them. When you see Sexton playing the way he did against the Sharks, he's at full capacity because he's so pumped. I mean, he doesn't operate at a level below. You see what Doris did last weekend. You see the way Van der Fleer has played this season. I think they are. They have another level to go for Ireland, obviously, but I think the tournament being better, and I'm convinced that it is much better this year, has been much better for the teams that are involved, and I think it will serve Ireland well, especially given the fact that there's no European games in the way there used to be. I think we're close to Champions Cup level with some of these URC games this year.
Your read on Leinster then, Fiona, broad terms over the 5 games?
Yeah, look, as I said, they're attacking. They're you can see they're slowly building. They're not the polished product. They're doing their usual where you've guys in and out. That can obviously affect how scorelines will end up eventually. But I suppose it's the breakdown is definitely an area that I've seen. They're getting quick ball, but it can be when teams make it messy. You can really see that it's affecting in how they attack and their positioning in where they carry to. So I think in general their attacking has been good, and defensively as well is another area that they might have to work a little bit harder on, because we saw the Sharks open them up, and I know you might say that's down to chance or the break of a ball, but that wasn't happening to them in past games, and there's definitely been a few missed tackles out of certain players that you wouldn't have seen either. So look, they're building, they're still as good as they ever were, but it's kind of this time last year I would have said, going after that many games of the URC, maybe they're a little bit unbeatable at the minute. I certainly don't think so now, and I think Connacht really put it up to them last weekend. And Furlong coming back, he gave away a couple of penalties in the scrum that hasn't really been as concise as it has in the past. So that's another area you would like to see Munster attack, even though they've given away a few penalties themselves. But you would presume that they'll tighten things up and definitely try and get at Porter or get at Furlong in that scrum. Okay,
so look, I know you haven't seen the teams yet, which makes it difficult, but what would you predict then for Saturday?
Look, I think if Munster can go fully loaded, I think Casey will be if they start with Casey, I just think the speed he brings, I think they'll really put it up to that Leinster team. I find when I'm watching Murray, I think the game slows down a lot. So I would be hoping that Casey gets it on, things get moving. Joey Carberry has an excellent game. You're probably going to have maybe 10 or 11 of these guys having to play out of their skin. But I think if they can go fully focused, I think the systems are now in place. We're seeing slight vision of it. If they can go and really put it up to that Leinster team, I think it could be quite a tight contest. Maybe Leinster might nick it, but not by that many points.
I think we take that, and I guess, Rory, the obvious incentive is this to transform Munster season and the general mood around them. So there's that as well. There's that carrot for them. What are you thinking? I think
I'll go with the kind of status quo. I think all the indications are that Leinster will win. They're in better form. They're a better team. When the Ireland selectors come to pick their team, they pick the Leinster player ahead of the Munster player almost across the board. They have an incredible forward pack. They're defending well in the tight, but that's a free pass for Munster. They're coming up the road with no pressure on them really, and no one expects them to win. They just have to perform, and they have to rattle Leinster, and they should be aiming to do so because they know that this team is human and they can get at them. But I think all indications are that Leinster will win the game and could do it by more than 10 points if they produce everything that they can. It's up to Munster to knock them off their stride.
Okay. Fiona, you've kind of dragged me into hoping this is going to be a good contest. So you're on next week. I mean, if this is a dud, you're coming on to apologise because you've given me hope, which is the worst thing.
Joe, I do this every single time about Munster. So how have you not learned your lesson?
I know.
No.
Honestly, they have a great chance of winning the European Cup this year. Great chance.
No, look, I really do. I think there's been a bit of pressure on. I think they know that going up the road, and I think they've got the win under the belt last week. So I do think, depending on obviously the team that gets picked, I do think they'll give Leinster a good battle up there.
Okay, well, fingers crossed, because it would give everyone, I think, something to look forward to. Just before we wrap up, the Wasps situation was one we meant to touch on Monday. Didn't quite get a chance. We were talking at length about Ulster and Connacht as well. So 167 players and staff laid off. This is a team, obviously, one of the marquee names, premiership titles, European titles. Their chief executive, Stephen Vaughan, did a podcast interview today where he outlined just how bad things are. They're £100 million in the red. Now, there's just no way for a club of Wasp stature to handle that level of debt. So I don't know, will they make a comeback next season in the Championship? But I think there's obviously a real fear of some kind of contagion here in English rugby, and the numbers are just not adding up for too many clubs. Yeah,
I was over on Monday at a social event with a load of English colleagues, and like the mood over there is so bleak about the state of English rugby. They're just beaten down by having to report on two of their marquee clubs, and Worcester aren't necessarily a marquee club. They're a Premiership club, but Wasps are blue chip. They're Absolutely. One of the biggest names. Yeah. One of my great memories of watching rugby was going to that Munster Wasps game in 2003 before I became a journalist. It was one of the games that helped me fall in love with the game. That team is iconic, and to think that they may never play in the European Cup again is just scary, and it's not good for Irish rugby. I know it's reflected and it's distant, but the European Cup is really important to us, and a weakened English Premiership, which it looks like it's going to be, because they're going to tighten their belts. They're going to lose loads of players to France. The French will get stronger. That's not good either. The game is too small to not have a strong, and England is too important, and the teams over there are really important, and Wasps are one of those. If you're Munster and you draw Wasps in the Heineken Cup, you'll sell tickets because it's a big name coming over from England, and I know they haven't been as strong in the last couple of years, but for it to go this far south, I guess we've always feared or suspected that there is a lot of the English clubs were kind of on borrowed time in some way, but you kind of always suspected that someone would step in and save the day, or the RFU, or someone would stop a brand that big from going bust. But there's no safety net.
No.
It shows the strength of the Irish system in some ways, but I don't think I don't say that to point score. I don't want English. I like the English club model. I think there's such strength in the independence of those clubs, and the names and the tradition that they have, and Wasps, I'd always thought going to Coventry was a strange move, albeit it gave them a big stadium, but the fact that they up sticks from their traditional base, Wanderers though they were, always didn't sit well with me at the time, and it just doesn't seem to have worked out. And
he said today they've been hemorrhaging money really since that move to Coventry. The point has been made that CVC are very quiet in this. Are they supposed to come up with 100 mil? Like, what are we expecting of them?
Well, what do they want? CVC are silent partners. Now, behind the scenes, from what I've from talking to figures in the IRFU, they say that CVC are a very active partner in terms of trying to drive revenues and commercial stuff, but they obviously don't see themselves as the lender of last resort to English rugby clubs. They may see that a streamlined Premiership is a better way to go, and like the RFU seem to be sitting on their hands a little bit and allowing Wasps to go to the wall, and that they'll get a more streamlined Premiership in the end with fewer teams and less games, which probably suits the player welfare agenda. It probably allows them to be in a stronger position when it comes to negotiating minutes and release for England and that sort of stuff. But that's a very it's stark enough to see that, So I think it's really sad, and obviously there's players involved. John Ryan, an Irish player who got released by Munster last year, went over to pursue his career at Wasps and has now found himself redundant, and loads of players from around the world in a similar situation. It's just it's awful, and it begs the question: how sustainable is this sport as a professional entity?
Well, that is the scary question hanging over the sport. Fiona, I know you watch pretty much every game of rugby going, so I'm sure you watch lots of Premiership. I mean, it's kind of wild to think Wasps are no more.
Yeah, it is. And, I really started watching him when Ian Costello went over as defence coach. He coached me in Bows. So, I know him and his wife. And I was delighted when he left Munster and went over there. And I really followed them. And I became a fan. And I went over and I watched him over in the Rio Arena as well. And you know, even you were saying it there in the stadium, there was a European night I went over there and it was quite dead in there. So you just wonder kind of the reasoning behind that. I know, like, obviously the women's doesn't generate a lot of money, but I know in the women's game, a lot of the players left the women's team because they, up until this year, they were training in London, even though the men's team was in Coventry, and they were told they had to move out to Coventry, and a lot of them had to leave because they had jobs in London and everything. So they lost a lot of their women's team through that as well. So look, I think it's very sad. It's the job losses, the people working in the stadium. It's really, really sad. But constantly Joy be saying, no, it's Wasps. Yeah. It won't happen to Wasps. It surely can't. They've such a tradition. You know, even the guys at the games and their blazers and their funny hats. They're just a great club, and it's amazing that it's happened. And hopefully something will come through last minute. But the way things are going, it doesn't really look like that way, does it?
No, it doesn't look great, to say the least. So we'll see how the weekend goes. Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent, Fiona Hayes with us. And Rory, just before we go, you are running a half marathon?
No, marathon. Full marathon.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Well, I might if I make more than a half marathon, I'll be doing quite well. But no, I'm attempting the full marathon, the Dublin Marathon on Sunday week.
For a wonderful cause, one close to your heart, and it's for Crumlin? Yeah,
so my, some listeners probably will be aware, my son Malachi passed away at 11 weeks earlier this year. So I've decided to run the marathon and raise funds for the Crumlin Hospital Foundation and specifically the units where he was treated. He spent half of his life in Crumlin and he got incredible care while he was there. And right now there's kids in ICU and kids in the heart centre who need help and support and need facilities. And so I'm raised money. We've got past 20,000 so far, which is absolutely amazing. Wow, and the support's been incredible. But if anyone out there wants to contribute, they can. It's a Just Giving page on my Twitter. And I'm looking forward to the challenge. It's been a good focus.
Okay, the Just Giving page on your Twitter. Your handle is?
@RuryOC.
Okay, very good. Well done, 20 grand.
Thanks. Well, I haven't done it yet.
Amazing. Sorry, you're keeping the money.
It all back, yeah.
Even if he collapses after a mile, he's keeping the money.
I know if I have to walk it, I'm not Kipchoge. I'm not going for any other records. If I have to walk it, I will. But no, I'm hoping to get around.
Okay. Well, listen, good man. Fair play.
Thanks, Joe.
Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent, Fiona Hayes with us as well. Our Rugby and Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.